Creating a bouncing ball is an all-important step in learning the fundamentals of animation physics. It is also a terrific way to learn Flash. In this video, we'll do both. I will demonstrate 3 different ways to create a bouncing ball animation using Flash CS6. If you're on a Mac, check your keyboard preferences. Make sure you can use your function keys. Let's start off by creating our character. I'll begin with the oval tool. Choose a fill and stroke color. With the oval selected, you can find its properties in the Properties panel. With the oval selected, press F8 to convert to symbol. Give it a logical name. Make sure it's a graphic symbol and leave the registration mark in the middle. Double-clicking back into the symbol will continue creating the art for our character. I want to give the ball something that appears to be a shadow and also some reflected light. And that's easily achieved with gradients. In this case, a radial gradient. And double-clicking on this marker, I can choose from the swatch palette. And continuing to edit the colors here in the color mixer. Reduce the brightness. The Gradient Transform tool is found nested beneath the Free Transform tool. You can use it to scale and reposition your gradient. Create a new layer, and once again using the oval tool, I'll create a highlight on the ball. Using the color mixer to desaturate. I'm going to change this outline from black to a dark blue. Select the pencil icon in the color mixer to adjust the outline color. And that is it for the art. Time to double click back out to the stage so we can animate this sucker. But first we need a background. So I'm going to make this super simple. Make a layer, name it background. I'll name my character layer ball. And choose a color for my background. I'll choose orange with no outline. Now using the rectangle tool, I'm going to make a raw rectangle larger than my stage. And using my selection tool, I'll carve out the rest of the shape. I need a platform for the ball to begin on and a ground plane for the ball to bounce across. And that ought to do it. We've done a lot of work up to this point. It might be a good idea to save our work. Now it's time to insert frames. Selecting at frame 90, I'll press F5 to insert frames. Now that we have frames to work with, we can create our keyframed animation. Press F6 at frame 10 to insert a keyframe. Using my arrow keys to nudge the ball over. Now I'll right-click between the 2 keyframes and choose Create Classic Tween. Selecting the tween, I'll find my easing properties in the Properties panel. Click on that little pencil for the custom easing panel. Add ease in and ease out. Clicking OK, and I'll preview the motion. Seems I need a bit more time, so I will drag that keyframe over, creating a keyframe every other frame so that I'll have a bouncing ball on 2s. We'll click right here to activate onion skinning, which gives us the ability to see the keyframes surrounding the frame that we're working on. Expand that range slider to see more drawings with onion skinning. I can squash and stretch the symbol, but notice how it's not squashing to the ground, but rather to its pivot point. If you hold the Option key down, it will negate the pivot point and you can squash it right down to the ground. Release the Option key, and you can stretch it like that. Back to this frame, and opening up my onion skinning. I can also use Option to create that sort of stretching. Command Z is undo. If you add the Shift, Command Shift Z, it removes all transforms. So the ball will pound, it will snap back to its original size when you created the symbol. And if you created the symbol at the size, at the ball that you're working with, it will just snap right back to its original size, which can be very helpful creating an animation like this. Through the fastest part of the motion, holding the Option key, and the free transform tool to squash and stretch. Not the way to do a bouncing ball. This is just a way of doing it. This Flash is not a great animator, but this way you have total control. Finish the animation. I need to insert some more frames to give me enough time, and then perhaps here on maybe 130. Right clicking between the two keyframes, choosing Classic Tween, and I'll give it an easing of maybe 80, 81. Turn onion skin off, and we can watch how that resolves. And maybe that's going a little slow. And then just have it settle. And let's take a look. And I'll render the Flash movie so we can see it in real time. Now, how can we improve this? It's like onion skinning, except for you expand the range slider. You literally have access to all of the keys at the same time. You can use this in your bouncing ball to quickly adjust the spacing, like I'm doing now. You can kind of see the whole action. Looking at this tween, I can select all that. And from my commands menu, I can choose tween to keys, which is an extension that you can add on to Flash as a third-party extension. You can find that at tunemonkey.com. And that's what it does. It converts your tween, it preserves the easing of your tween, and converts it to twos. I can do the same thing down here. And let's take a look. And let's save that work. In this next version of the bouncing ball, I'm going to use a more pose-to-pose approach. I'm also going to use classic motion guides and a combination of classic motion tweening and straight-ahead keyframed animation. Let's start by locking my background. Make sure that I don't accidentally select my background layer. And now I am going to select the layer that the ball is on, mousing over the name of the layer, mousing over the layer name, right click, choose Add Classic Motion Guide. Notice how the layer has indented and also been nested under this brand new guide layer, which is a blank layer. We use the line tool to create our motion guides. And let's make sure that drawing object mode is turned off and choose a color for the line. Make sure that you have the motion guide layer selected and not the ball layer like I was doing just then. Line tool. Now I'm starting at around the center here of the ball. And now what we need to do is select the ball, turn snapping on, and now mousing over the end of the line will snap to the pivot point of the ball. And now let's create a keyframe at about frame 23 on the ball layer, F6, to create a keyframe. And now let's make sure your playhead is moused over that keyframe at frame 23, and then move your ball down to its first contact point. And now selecting the line, the end of the line, make sure that that's snapped also to the pivot point of the ball. And now creating our classic tween between those two keyframes. You can see that the ball is just moving in a straight line. But as soon as we begin to bend our motion guide, notice the symbol will follow along that path. And that means any way that you bend it. If that's not working for you, make sure to check the end of the line and that it's snapped directly to the pivot point at both keyframes. Now, using this technique, I'm going to recreate this bouncing ball. Boing. And so first, I'm going to create the path here on the motion guide layer. I'm just going to use the line tool. Snapping is on. A mouse over the end of this line, and it's going to connect to it, in essence becoming one line. And I'm just going to create for myself create for the symbol path to follow. Maybe that many bounces. Also, if I click on View and choose Rulers, I can click anywhere inside the ruler and drag out a visual guide that I can use. This visual guide will not render. Also, anything on a guide layer, a motion guide layer, will not render. So these lines that I'm manipulating now will not be seen in the final rendering. This is only exclusively to guide the path of the ball or of the symbol. And now I really am just guesstimating as to the path this ball should take. And the timing of the bounce. And once again, making sure that that line is locked to the pivot point of the ball. Now at this point, there's no particular timing. I'm just, other than just when the impacts happen. And they should happen closer and closer together as the ball loses steam. Selecting between the two keyframes, choosing Create Classic Tween. And then, like before, yeah, the ball is leaving the motion guide at this point, and that's just fine. And once again, easing, positive, around 80. Okay, so let's see what we have so far. And we can see how that timing sucks, but we've got all of our keyframes and poses. We can adjust this timing a little bit, but I'm kind of liking what I'm seeing so far, so let's continue. So it would start slow, it would speed up until it impacts. So we can give that like -100 and see what that looks like. Boom. It's looking good. And perhaps the arc of this path needs a bit of an adjustment. And at this point I'm going to turn snapping off so I can have a bit more control with my selection tool, manipulating the line, my motion guide. Poing. Now selecting the tween between these two keyframes and mousing over my properties panel right here under tweening next to ease, I can find this pencil, which is the custom easing panel. And with the custom easing panel I can do ease in and ease out. And in this case the ball after impact is going to launch pretty quickly. Then it's going to slow down in the middle when it's up here in the air. And then it's going to speed to the ground once again, and that curve would look something like this. And we can preview that by clicking here. See? That looked pretty good. Do it again. And then you can adjust the curve. Maybe you want it to launch a little faster, a little less hang time. Looking good. Now I'm going to hit Control, or excuse me, I'm going to hit Command and the letter C for copy. That copies this timing. Click OK. And now I'm going to select this tween. Go back to our custom easing panel, Command and the V key for paste. Now the ball would be losing steam at this point, so let's make this curve to be a little bit less intense. And we can preview it. copy and hit OK. Move to the next little tween, custom easing, paste. And let's see what we have so far. So that's a decent bounce, but there's no squash and stretch. Now when we begin to add squash and stretch, by adding keyframes, there is the potential that the timing of our easing can be affected. So you have to be careful how and where you place your keyframes. Sometimes what I like to do is to rough a bouncing ball using motion guides and motion tweens, and then use the tween to keys command right here to put the entire animation on twos, and then I'll go frame by frame and add the squash and stretch like I did in the first example. In this case, what I'll first attempt to do is to add the squash and stretch and preserve the tweens, and let's see how it goes. Maybe all of that. I'm just going to key all of that. And then beginning with this frame and using onion skin like we did before. So by keying all of those frames, I basically bake in the timing of the easing. Boom, and there's my impact frame. Whoops. I can even lock my motion guide or hide it at this point. I'll just leave it on because I can use that as a visual reference. And at this point, it doesn't matter if the ball falls off of the motion path, off of the motion guide, because I've keyframed all of this and it's not dependent on the motion guide anymore. There's my launch frame. Maybe I want to back that up just a little bit. And then back to the normal shape, the original shape, and it'll keep that shape all the way through until right about here. So I'm just going to select all of that. If I select too many frames, that's okay. Now I'm not going to start on this frame. If I were to elongate that, look what happens. See how the ball elongates through there. We don't want to do that. So we'll leave this first keyframe right there untouched and just move right into this one using onion skin. And I'm just going to quickly finish this off, as I think you will see where we're going with it. See how it's snapping back to the motion guide? I don't want that to happen, so what I'll do is select on the motion guide layer, choose F7, I guess unlocking the layer first, F7 to create a blank keyframe at that point. Lock that layer down again. So clearly not perfect. Crap. Now how can I improve this? I'm going to go back and adjust the spacing of the ball and of the keyframes to affect the timing. Better. Still a little slow. I feel through here and through here. And let's see how that looks. Boing, boing. So a little better. Keep fussing with these keyframes and those motion tweens, and eventually you're going to have yourself a perfect looking bouncing ball. For my third bouncing ball, what I'm going to do is take this one and put it on 2s without any motion tweens, and use this as my starting point. It's not perfect. I'm going to perfect it in this final pass. Choosing the Tween to keys command, I've been careful to make sure all my keyframes were on odd numbers, because I start on frame 1, so I want my 2s to be 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. So I made sure that all of my keyframes were on odd numbers. Therefore, when I use Tween to keys, all of my original keyframes are still there, preserved. Basically all these impact frames. That's important. You don't want to lose those when you use Tween to keys. Okay, now let's go frame by frame using onion skin. Uh-oh, looks like I lost my in between stretch frame here. And now that everything is keyframed, it doesn't matter what I do to the keyframes. It's not going to affect any of the frames around it. Each keyframe, in essence, is a drawing, isolated from the other ones. So you can change it without affecting the drawings around it. And perhaps right here in this area, I want this to be on 1s. So I just used Shift F5 to remove frames in order to close that gap. and save your work. So that looks pretty good. But you may be asking, well, what if I wanted that ball to rotate while it's bouncing? How would I accomplish that? I'm going to show you a quick cheat how to do that. First of all, we need to double click into the ball symbol. You can see that we have two layers here, one for the highlights and one for the rest of the artwork for our character. We need something physical on here to help us to see the rotation. If we rotated the whole symbol from outside, we would see this shadow and highlight rotating, but that wouldn't look right. Highlights and shadows don't rotate. So let's put a stripe on the ball. Let's see, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this art, copy, and then I'll make a layer above, and this is going to be the outline. I'm going to paste in place, and then getting rid of my fill, all I have left now is this outline. And that's great. And let's make a layer below the outline. I'm going to call this layer stripe. We're going to give the ball a stripe. I think a yellow stripe would look good with no outline and a yellow fill. Using the rectangle tool and also in drawing object mode. On the new layer, the stripe layer, I'm going to create a rectangle like that. Then double clicking into the drawing object, I have access to this raw art. Now I can just manipulate that however I like. And holding the Option key, I can add vector points to my shape. That gives me a bit more control on what this curve will look like. Just like that. Or if you prefer, you can use the white arrow, the direct select tool, and adjust your curves that way. I prefer to just use the selection tool. It's a bit faster once you get the hang of it. Alright, and there you have it. There's our stripe. Clicking back out. I'm going to select this art, copy. I'm going to select the stripe layer, and just paste in place. Let's move that down below, and also select the stripe. So I have this art and that stripe selected. The reason I'm doing that because as I make a symbol of the stripe, I want that symbol to be the exact same size as the ball overall. So pressing F8, call this stripe. Make sure it's a graphic symbol. Rotation point right in the middle. Clicking OK. Boom. Now let's double click into that symbol, choose this art, and just delete it. But now this stripe's rotation point is right where we need it, like that. And this should also be below the highlight layer. I can name this highlight. And now we can get some rotation like this, in a sense. So what I'm going to do, first of all, clicking back out to the stage, see how many frames this animation is. It basically comes to a stop right here on frame 76. So double clicking back into the ball, first of all, insert frames, and mousing over frame 76, I'll choose the stripe layer, hitting F6 to create a keyframe. Now selecting somewhere between the first and the final keyframe, right click, choose Create Classic Tween. So what we need to do is select the tween, mouse over to the property panel, and right here where it says rotate, it's usually set to auto by default. What we're going to do is either choose clockwise or counterclockwise. In this case, I think we should go clockwise, and that's rotating one time, so we can see the stripe does one full rotation. But how about let's crank that up a little bit, selecting the tween. We can make it rotate maybe 5 times, and let's see what that looks like. Boing, boing. All right, just like that, rotating. But it's all moving at the same speed, so let's give that some easing. So selecting the tween, choosing my custom easing, I think it should start super slow, accelerate, and then it'll end super slow as well. So it'll ease in, speed up, ease out. Clicking OK, and let's take a look. See, it starts slow, it speeds up, and then it slows down again. I think it can slow a bit more right at the end. So just doing that to adjust it, and perhaps clicking here to put another point, I could kind of flatten out the timing of the motion through the middle part of the action. Now, clicking back out to the stage, take a look. Okay, so right now we don't see any rotating stripe, and let's see why. So mousing over the first frame, selecting our ball symbol, you can see that the looping is set to loop. Let's set that to play once. Make sure the first frame is actually frame number 1. This is talking about what's going on the inside of the symbol. We want that animation to begin on frame 1 as well. If I were to type in another number, like say frame 11, hit return, boom, you can see how the stripe has changed. If I click in, you can see we're on frame 11. So we want the animation inside to start on frame 1 as well. And now selecting all of the frames on that layer, right clicking, we're going to choose synchronize symbols. Boom, and that should do the trick. Yeah, now we have a rotating stripe. Now, one problem is that the motion on the inside of the ball is on 1s, whereas the motion on the outside is on 2s, and so you get this kind of strobing effect. So let's go on ahead and fix that now by clicking into the ball, and we want to put all of this on 2s. We want it to match what's happening on the outside of the ball. How about this? We're just going to do it manually. So I'm going to click in, I'm going to select all of this tween and turn the whole thing into keyframes. Can even remove tween now. Okay, but we still have that rotation with the timing. And we can see that it's every other frame. We're on 2s through this section all the way up to frame number 19. So clicking in, Shift F6, frame over 2, Shift F6, or holding the Command key, you can select every other keyframe just like that until we get up to frame 19, which is the next frame. Shift F6 clears those out. We want this to be on 1s all the way through frame 22. So clicking in at frame 22. And click back out. Let me see. Right here, frame 36 is where we go back to 1s. So from frame 22, as I scroll through the animation, here at the end it seems like there's some strobing going on. That's caused because the animation on the stripe is not synchronized with the keyframes on the stage. So I need to compare keyframes on the stage with the keyframes of the stripe, and I can see it right there. Yes, I need to move these over 1 frame. And now, yeah, it looks like that. And so if I render my Flash movie, that should have fixed the problem. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to go into greater depth learning Flash, you can find my class, Flash 101, and other course offerings at studioarts.com. I appreciate your patience during this long video. That's enough for now, and I'll see you next time.